John Cameron Quaid.
David John Chancellor.
Appeal rejected. It's death by hanging for Saddam Hussein in the next 30 days. And tonight, a grim new marker for the U.S. military in Iraq. The day after Christmas, let the shopping begin, and buyer beware, prices may not be at all what you'd expect. Milk and meat from cloned animals. Why these products may be one step closer tonight to a supermarket near you. And into the NBC archives for a look back at the American original who died on Christmas Day.
From NBC News World Headquarters in New York, this is NBC Nightly News with Brian Williams. Substituting tonight, Lester Holt.
Good evening, everyone. He was toppled from power, hunted down, and made to answer for his crimes. And today we learned Saddam Hussein, the so-called butcher of Baghdad, is out of options. He's lost his final appeal and is to be executed by hanging less than a month from now. And as Iraqis prepare to close the Saddam era once and for all, the United States today turned its own grim page. The military today reported the deaths of 7 more Americans, bringing this country's total losses in Iraq to 2,978, surpassing the number of people killed in the attacks of September 11th. We have reports from Iraq and the Western White House tonight, beginning with NBC's Richard Engel in Baghdad. Richard, good evening.
Good evening, Lester. This execution could be carried out very soon, perhaps even within the next 2 weeks, according to Iraqi officials who tell us that it will take place inside an Iraqi prison where now terrorists and criminals are being put to death.
Iraqi television scrambled to carry the announcement live. Today's decision was both a surprise and rushed. Just 3 weeks after the 9 judges received the appeal, they dismissed it, upholding a death sentence read to a seemingly broken man in November. Judges today said Saddam must now be executed within 30 days.
The countdown begins tomorrow. Nobody has the right to lighten the sentence.
But reactions in Baghdad were less emphatic. Most people were too frightened to go out to celebrate or protest. At a local coffee shop, one man said, "We demand his execution early so we can close this chapter." But another asked, "Who cares about Saddam? We are still suffering now. This verdict is just a distraction." And again, they suffered today. At least 5 bombs in Baghdad killed more than 50 Iraqis. I saw a 60-year-old woman carrying a child bleeding from her head, but I couldn't save her, he said. The U.S. military expects Saddam's execution to trigger even more violence here. Saddam Hussein was convicted for ordering the execution of 148 men and boys after a failed assassination attempt 24 years ago in a Shiite village. But critics say his trial was motivated more by revenge than justice.
There's been political interference and political pressure, and this has not fulfilled the international or minimum fair trial standards.
The Shiite group that tried to kill Saddam 2 decades ago now leads the Iraqi government, soon to hang him.
To stop this execution, Lester, Iraq's president would have to intervene on moral grounds. There's no indication he has any intention of doing that. Iraqi officials tell us that Saddam will not receive any special favors, that on the day of his execution he'll be dressed in a green or an orange jumpsuit, that his hands will be bound, his feet chained together with only enough slack on the chain so that he can shuffle up the stairs of this steel gallows. He'll be wearing a hood, as will the hangman. The hangman's hood, however, will have eye holes cut in it so that he can see the lever releasing a trapdoor under Saddam's feet, dropping him to his death. Lester?
And Richard, I know you just returned to Baghdad after a 7-week absence. Share with me your thoughts, what has changed, what hasn't changed in that 7 weeks?
There is a sense, Lester, that this city is in a sense, a free fall. Just since I've been gone, there are now signs up in certain Sunni neighborhoods that say Shiites out, Sunnis only. Sunni militant groups now have their own television station where they're showing viewers how to launch mortars and assemble car bombs. 2 cameramen, Iraqi cameramen I know, have been kidnapped by insurgents. Both managed to escape. One had to jump out of the back of a moving car. And all of this, Lester, just in the last few weeks.
All right, Richard Engel in Baghdad tonight. Richard, thanks. There is a reaction to all this tonight from the Bush White House. The president himself is at his ranch in Crawford, Texas, where he's contemplating the next move for the U.S. in Iraq. NBC's Kelly O'Donnell joins us from there tonight. Kelly, good evening.
Good evening, Lester. The White House describes itself as an outside observer when it comes to carrying out the death sentence for Saddam Hussein. Politically, they're looking at it this way. They say that Iraq has moved from the rule of a tyrant to the rule of law. Here in Texas, the president will be spending some time working on retooling his war strategy. And advisors say he's being deliberate. He's asking about options and the consequences, including adding more U.S. troops. And today, a senior military official says that the deployment orders are ready to go, just needing a signature for another brigade. That would be about 3,500 more soldiers from the 82nd Airborne who would go to Kuwait with the possibility of going into Iraq. And on Thursday, the president will be meeting here with his national security team to talk about all of this. But advisors are downplaying expectations, saying they don't expect any final decisions at that meeting. Lester?
Kelly O'Donnell in Crawford, thanks. A terrible scene in Nigeria's largest city today where hundreds of people burned to death when a fuel pipeline exploded. It happened in Lagos as crowds began stealing gasoline from a pipe cut open by vandals. The fuel ignited, sparking a fire that burned for hours. At least 269 people were killed. More than 150 are being treated in hospitals there. For nations along the Indian Ocean, this was a somber day of remembrance. Thousands gathered for ceremonies to honor more than 200,000 who lost their lives when a massive tsunami hit 2 years ago. Yet even as the memorials were taking place today, 2 powerful earthquakes rocked Taiwan, triggering a regional tsunami alert for a short time. Earthquakes measuring 7 and 7.1 toppled buildings and started fires, but few casualties were reported. Now to the way many Americans spent this day after Christmas, shopping around. While many were out there looking for and finding deep discounts, retailers have millions of reasons for stocking up on full-price merchandise as well. CNBC's Scott Cohn is live tonight in New York's famous Herald Square. Scott, good evening.
Good evening to you, Lester. The shoppers have been out in force all day. They are still out in force, returning that gift that wasn't quite right, looking for those holiday bargains, and sometimes, no matter what the price, cashing in those increasingly popular gift cards.
Now the hardcore shoppers come out. Tracy DeMarco and her whole family are searching for bargains and finding plenty.
Everything is 50, 60% off.
As retailers try to unload what they didn't sell.
We do this every year and we have a blast.
Holiday sales were up about 6.5% this year, but that's less than the industry hoped for and below the nearly 9% increase last year.
The holiday season was mixed at best.
And it started with such promise. More than enough buzz over just about everything electronic. What happened? Warm weather in many parts of the country. Outerwear sales could be down as much as 20%. And a generally strong economy starting to show signs of weakness.
We're not exactly in the best of economic times.
But it's not over yet.
I'm going to shop for myself today.
Americans gave a record $25 billion worth of gift cards, and stores can't count those sales until the cards are redeemed. That gives retailers a second chance.
This week is very important. It can reach in excess of 16% of holiday season sales, and the amount that will be spent on gift cards is the big unknown.
People typically buy a little something else when they cash in a gift card. This year, shoppers will find lots of nice things to choose from.
We keep going until we can't go no more.
At some really nice prices.
But not everything is marked down. Those gift cards have really changed the retail dynamic. So now, some retailers are actually putting out full-price merchandise, new merchandise, to take advantage of those gift card shoppers. It's sort of a second season, and it's underway now. Lester?
All right. Scott, thank you. Wall Street came back from its Christmas break today, although trading was light. At the closing bell, the Dow was up more than 64 points, NASDAQ up 12 and change. Get ready for what could be a big change at the dinner table. NBC News has learned that the government is set to announce later this week that after years of study, it has concluded that the milk and meat from cloned cattle, pigs, and goats are safe to serve in restaurants and sell in grocery stores. But some find the whole idea very unappealing. Here's NBC's Tom Costello.
It's been 10 years since Dolly the sheep was first cloned in Scotland. Now a decision that could eventually put the meat and milk from cloned animals or their offspring on grocery store shelves. In an FDA report to be released on Thursday, researchers write the meat and milk from clones and their progeny is as safe to eat as products from other animals.
A clone is not a genetically engineered animal. No genes have been changed or moved or deleted. This is simply a genetic twin of another animal that we know to be one of the best on our farms and ranches.
Today in the U.S., there are roughly 600 clones created in petri dishes by replacing an egg's nucleus with the DNA from the donor animal. The FDA researchers say since there's nothing to differentiate between an animal that has been cloned and one that hasn't, there's no reason to put a special label on products from cloned animals. But consumer advocates strongly disagree.
It will be sneaked into the marketplace, and we at Consumer Federation of America think people should object to that.
Selling the idea to consumers may not be easy. In surveys conducted this month, 64% of those asked were uncomfortable with animal cloning, while more than 30% said they'd never buy meat or milk from a cloned animal.
There is a real trust that people have in milk and milk products as a core part of our nutrition and our health. So you don't want to mess around with that.
Already 7 farm state senators want more scientific review and public input before the FDA makes a decision on something that could end up on dinner tables nationwide. Tom Costello, NBC News, Bethesda, Maryland.
And up next, as NBC Nightly News continues for this Tuesday evening, the few, the proud, the caring. The U.S. Marines at work in a way you may not have imagined. And later, what it was like back in the day and why James Brown will always be known as the hardest working man in show business. NBC News in depth tonight, special care on the home front. They call themselves the softer side of the Marines. They're members of a group with one of the most emotionally demanding missions in the service, introducing wounded veterans to their changed lives and reintroducing them to their loved ones back home. And that means doing all they can to give their Marines the support they need to pull through. Here's NBC's Campbell Brown in depth.
Their work begins the moment a new casualty arrives at the National Naval Medical Center in Bethesda, Maryland. It's here many of the most seriously wounded Iraq War veterans begin to heal.
You guys need anything, please don't hesitate to give us a call.
And he does mean anything. They are the Special Marine Liaison Unit, a team of 22 charged with more than just bringing holiday cheer.
Oh, thank you. You're welcome.
They describe themselves as a 5-star concierge service. It's their mission to take care of almost any need these injured Marines or their families may have. The shelves in their office are stocked with everything from toiletries to T-shirts. The unit flew this injured Marine's family of 13 in for Thanksgiving and planned this wedding in the hospital chapel. But they are also just a shoulder to lean on.
What's going on today? How you feeling?
I'm feeling all right.
Sergeant Daniel Casmore knows exactly how these Marines are feeling. He was wounded last year in Fallujah by a roadside bomb.
They know I'm not just someone that's been pushing papers. They know that, hey, this guy's been there, he's done it, and he knows what I'm going through, so they open up more with me.
The Marines in this unit had been helping injured troops since this hospital first started taking casualties in early 2003. To date, they have helped more than 2,000 troops, the vast majority with injuries caused by IEDs.
I knew I was being thrown from the vehicle. I knew immediately it was an IED.
Lance Corporal Timothy Lang's leg and foot had to be reconstructed. He has months of physical therapy ahead before he'll even be able to stand on his own. But thanks to the logistical efforts of the liaison unit, getting airline tickets, housing, and transportation, his mother has been at his side since he first arrived.
The support has been wonderful to the family, to him, you know, to all the Marines. It's just been wonderful.
Marines who say they are just following their tradition of taking care of their own. Campbell Brown, NBC News, Bethesda, Maryland.
Up next tonight, in the American heartland, a different kind of war over illegal immigration. Tom Brokaw takes a closer look at the myths and the realities on both sides of this growing debate. A major study of prescription heartburn drugs indicates that some popular brands can increase the risk of fractures. The study published in the Journal of the American Medical Association found that taking drugs such as Nexium, Prilosec, and Prevacid for more than a year puts patients at a seriously higher risk of hip fractures after the age of 50. Researchers believe the drugs may make it more difficult for the body to absorb calcium, leading to weaker bones. Now to a great divide in America, one that has taken center stage for much of 2006, illegal immigration and border security. As the debate raged, Tom Brokaw examined some of the myths and the truths in a place you might not expect, the Colorado Rockies, where many, including a man named Trino, are willing to break the law to find work. Here's part of Tom's special report, In the Shadow of the American Dream.
My life has a change here, a big change. I'm just go to work and go back to my house, sleep.
Trino admits breaking the law by crossing the border and using false documents to get hired. He says he couldn't find a decent job in Mexico and didn't think he had a chance of getting one of the 5,000 visas available to unskilled workers.
And how much did it cost you to get here?
It cost me like $1,500.
To save money, Trino shares the $1,800 rent with his 3 brothers, other relatives, and friends.
How many of you have a social security number?
None.
None of you.
18 immigrants in all live in this 4-bedroom home, which is zoned for a single family. But he and his brothers defend this living arrangement as just extended family.
We are just a family, like uncles and, sons and cousins.
It's the double standard when it comes to illegal immigrants and the law that angers many Americans.
My biggest problem with it is when people show up here and they don't follow the rules.
Although many Americans find it offensive that these immigrants live so cheaply in such crowded conditions, Trino's niece, the 6-year-old who also lives in this house, doesn't seem to mind.
And you sleep on the floor?
Trino's niece attends kindergarten at Crystal River Elementary School. All the children in this class are Hispanic, except for 2 Anglo children. While Trino's niece learns English, white children, such as Spencer Ochko, study Spanish.
Spencer knows a lot more Spanish than I do at this point. He can count to 40, he can do all of these things, and I think it's wonderful. I think it's wonderful.
Spencer's mother, Kim Ochko, is conflicted.
It frightens me a little bit.
What frightens you?
Well, the fact that I'm becoming a minority and my children are a minority in the school system. It's a little daunting.
You can see all of Tom Brokaw's special report, In the Shadow of the American Dream, tonight here on NBC at 8, 7 Central. And when we come back right here in just a moment, the brilliance of James Brown and performances you haven't seen. And late today, there will be a public send-off for soul music legend James Brown, who died on Christmas Day. A public viewing will be held at the famed Apollo Theater in New York on Thursday, followed by a public memorial service on Saturday in his hometown of Augusta, Georgia. Tonight, we go deep into our archives to bring you some pictures of James Brown you haven't seen anywhere else, as we remember a man many say changed the course of American popular music. He was born James Joseph Brown Jr. in Depression-era South Carolina. But he became the godfather of soul and the hardest working man in show business.
Papa's got a brand new bed.
He begged.
Please, please, please.
He pleaded. But he always gave. Fellow R&B icon Little Richard, whom Brown once called his idol, says James Brown redefined entertainment for a generation of artists.
No James Brown, you wouldn't have no disco. You wouldn't have had no hip-hop, no rap. And the type of rhythm and blues soul, you wouldn't have had that.
But whether supporting Live 8 to raise awareness of third world debt,
we have to solve it by loving each other,
or simply inspiring young kids, Brown sang with a message. Sometimes love, sometimes empowerment.
And always say it loud that you're proud.
He was black and he was proud, and his music was hardcore soul. Yet even as James Brown was bringing black audiences to their feet in places like the Apollo Theater, his style and sound were also resonating across racial and cultural divides. His crossover appeal was embodied by this performance in Rocky IV. I feel good! And before that, appearing at the Nixon White House. And of course, nobody owned a stage like James Brown.
To me, he had electric legs. He was an explosion on stage.
He was never formally trained in music, but he gave the songs he sang rhythm and life and made them timeless. At the 2005 Grammys, he collaborated with one of today's hottest artists, Usher. His final performance was just last month at his induction into the UK Music Hall of Fame. Where, as always, he left the audience with something to feel good about. And you can see more of James Brown from the NBC archives, as well as more of today's interview with Little Richard on our website, nightly.msnbc.com. And that's our broadcast for this Tuesday night. Thanks for being with us. For Brian Williams and all of us at NBC News, I'm Lester Holt. Good night.